Okay, dann lasse ich jetzt alle rein.
Good evening, everybody in the round. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Artist Talk with Irene Weingartner and Robert Mantho tonight. To all who do not know me, my name is CLARA SELS and I'm the owner of the gallery you see in the background. And currently we have a show with Irene, Nothing is the Same, running until the end of February. Very welcome you all. To tonight, after a short introduction of Irene and Robert, they will start their discussion, which will take around 30 to 40 minutes. Afterwards, the audience can ask questions to Irene and Robert. One last thing, we want to record the event, so in case somebody minds, please send a note over the chat and then we will stop after the discussion. Irene, where are you? Good evening.
Hi. Hey, thank you, Clara. Clara, thank you for organizing this talk. And I think you gave somehow the input and the inspiration to do this talk about this project, like architecture, like this recording of the body and architecture. And you said that it would be interesting to talk to or with an architect. And of course, then it was clear for me to get in touch with Robert Mantho, because we worked for, I think it was almost 1 year, 1.5 years, when I was in Glasgow, almost 2 years together on the project. And it was like a starting point. Afterwards, I was in Düsseldorf, where I'm still am. And I went a bit further with this project. I think, and also it's great that you all are here. There are people from Cologne, Düsseldorf, Zurich, Glasgow. So it's really nice, because I think that's the positive thing about technique, that we can meet like a bit internationally.
The lockdown is not so funny for everybody, so it is really beautiful that we can see each other and hear each other over the technique. Robert, it's the first time we met. Probably you can say a bit about you. You are a famous architect, and I know how highly appreciated you are in your field.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you, Clara, and thank you, Irene. I'm very interested in the work that Irene does for lots of reasons, but as Irene has an image up on the screen, I'm a licensed architect, and I practiced for many years. And while I was practicing, I was also involved with a collaboration that was about making site-specific pieces of work that were temporary and connected to sort of architectural issues with another architect. And Irene is, there's an image of a project that we did together in Burlington, Vermont. I now teach full-time at the Glasgow School of Art in the Mackintosh School of Architecture there. And that's how Irene and I got connected, through a former student of mine. And it started a conversation between two people thinking about architectural space that's generated around the human body from sort of slightly different perspectives. But we found that we had many common interests and concerns, and also sort of strategies for pursuing it. And as I said, this is a project we did together, a friend of mine and I, another architect, Michael Wenrick, through a collaboration that we call Locus. There's one other project after that that I think Irene is going to show you. So that you see, and this is a project that we did in Portland, Oregon. And again, it was about making architectural space through drawing in space with a set of lines. And you can see, when you see Irene's work, you'll see why there's a kind of a shared territory of conversation. And I'll let you go, Irene. This project establishes a sympathy.
Yeah, I think now, thank you, Robert. I think now I will begin to make a very short introduction with a little video to see all the steps very briefly. And afterwards, we will go through images and talk about our collaboration and about the project. So that's here. Can you see it?
Yeah, but that, yeah.
Okay, good. I started. Now you see like one image of this show at the moment at the Clara Maria SELS gallery. Clara is sitting there. Maybe you saw the background, and here it's a bit more clear. It's difficult to take image of it, but you see, I will talk about the also about the drawing in the back. So you have got an idea how big it is. It's about 150 to 150. And the video goes further. Here, that's this drawing. And I call that seismographic recording of the body. It's like a body image in a way. Here is another one. And then there was another step to the question of how, because these drawings are really complex, and to think about structures which one could use for architectural structures or so, they need to be like simplified. So I've had at one point the idea that I could lay tracing paper on top of it. You see here, maybe I will explain later a bit more about it, and cut it out and then install it in front of the drawing. Here is another one, like such a cutout, which you see the shadows, and that's just hanged. It's also in the show at the moment. And out of these like simplified structures, I began to build models with balsa wood. And later on, for some reasons we also will explain, I made a little collaboration with the Unikliniken in Düsseldorf to make computer tomographies of these models. So I think that's for the beginning, a little very brief like insight of the work. And now I would start to show you some images. Great. So now I will start to explain a bit about the drawings originated from the body. If you can imagine, if you would concentrate maybe on your big toe, for example, and then not imagine how the toe looks like, but just to draw the sensation. And you could do that with your legs or your stomach, or I already did sometimes such little drawing introductions, but maybe you can imagine. And so that's in a way how I work. I really concentrate on my body. And I think, okay, somewhere here, there is something, I mean, something, or I concentrate on this part and see what happens, and then I try to draw that. And as I said, not how I would imagine it, it's more that how I would feel it. So at one point I thought, okay, I could draw a system how it works. I always thought like I could be like a drawing machine. I came a bit away from this thought because it's it's quite complex, and now after about, I do that since 2007, and after all this time, I don't feel as a machine anymore. So, but I thought then the body, it's like the production of signals. These signals go to the brain. The brain is converting the signals and routing it further to arm, hand, pen, pencil, paper. So, but maybe if I talk about the machine, it means also that I don't want to put my feelings into it, but really abstract these sensations, like physical sensations. So that's like the system, how I do these drawings. And I think that was one of the first ones I did. I think it was number 3, so I must have done, but that's really the image I have of the only image from the very first ones. And I think then I still had some image in my head how to do it. Later on, it got more and more abstract, and this drawing you saw already in the video is from 2000 and I think 18. So not, I mean, that's about that, how these recordings look like. And when I was in Glasgow, I think they looked quite similar. So I was there in 2014, and I was then working, thinking about, and I was reading a book by Gaston Bachelard, Poetics of Space. It's a wonderful book, actually. And then he was describing about snakes and how snakes are building their house and so forth. And I thought, okay, if I've got these structures from my body, it would be really interesting to think about, like, there could be architectonical structures. I could go into 3D. Here is a detail of this drawing. And so I more or less was there in the studio in Glasgow, and I knew that in the coffee shop downstairs there is working an architect in the coffee shop, and I was more or less running down and telling her my idea, and then she said, you really have to talk to Robert. So that was how we got in touch with each other. And then quite soon we began to work together, or to think about and to discuss. And I think our discussions were like, first, if you have got like such a drawing, now we can draw into it. If you have such lines here, do you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. How, I mean, you have got like these lines, and how could you think about that they could come into the space? Because if you plan a house or so, you usually have got like floor plan, and that's this floor plan, Grundrisse. These floor plans are like, you imagine first how a building should look like, and then you think how these floor plans adapt your ideas. So it's like you go from an idea, you make floor plans and all these sections and views. So just all the plans for building a house. But what we had was just like these structures and these drawings, and that was the huge question. How could we get into 3D with that? Because, for example, if you have got this line here, you have to think whether what is the truth length, you know, what does it mean? I mean, is it like this or this or this? I mean, you know, it could go also into the back here. We don't see that. And so we began to think about with which technique, with what, or how we could go into work. When we were talking about, Robert taught me something about the brain. Can you tell that again?
The what?
About the brain. You told me that,
yes.
can you remember what?
Yes, yes. What we were trying to do was trying to find ways to map space, or to use the two-dimensional information to make three-dimensional readings, to find ways to say the disposition of these planes in space. Because the thing about Irene's drawings are that they're sort of like clouds, where you can interpret, you know, a huge variety of spatial make a huge variety of spatial interpretations. And so we were talking about, well, you know, how can you find the space? How can you establish some type of logic for reading the drawings? And I was saying to her, well, it's kind of what I say to my students, that, you know, the human brain is constructed to perceive the world and construct spatial relationships, and that what we're trying to do in an architectural education is to try to foreground, to try to make what is a kind of natural thing that you don't think about, trying to make that conscious and establish an understanding of the way in which space operates, and the way in which different boundaries, edges, and elements that are in the environment, the way in which they establish a sense of containment and spatial definition. And I always use the analogy with my students. It's like we all have a spatial muscle in our brain, and we need to sort of develop it and exercise it and train it so that we are conscious of it, of the way it operates, so that we can strategize about how to utilize that understanding of space and the understanding of the way space is framed. So I went through a series of exercises, and Irene taught me how to do the seismographic drawing. So I would draw with her, imagining or mapping the sensation of my body and make marks. And then we would talk about strategies that are used by architects for establishing relationships between elements in space. And so this drawing is an example of trying to use projective or orthographic techniques to establish where various elements in the drawing are positioned in space by using the techniques of plan and section.
Yeah, and when you told me that because of the spatial brain, in a way, you know, like that, it also, you also can train that. And I realized that I've once had it and it went a bit like away, and I tried to get back into it. And then I began to, I thought maybe we could solve the problem with drawing, like with the technique of drawing like plans, or like these techniques, you know, of projecting. It's like these are like these technical how to say,
Projective geometry. Or orthographic drawings.
Yeah, okay. I thought maybe I could like have this one here, for example, you know, and project it down and find out what happens down here, you know, making decisions and get them like into a space. So then I went like further with that. and did, for example, this one, having like a floor, seeing more or less like a floor plan, but like the full lines are like on the floor and the dashed lines are like higher in the height. So here, if you have, for example, A. Okay, my A, I think, was here, exactly. So I projected this up, and that was here. And so for, you know, there were just these points, and then I made that from different views. And for example, here was the A, or here was the A. So you can imagine that's a very simple structure, and I realized it's almost impossible to do it like this by hand and by having a drawing solution, because it gets unbelievable complex and complicated. Then Robert had got another idea. That was then this outcome. Maybe you can tell about that.
Yeah, so this is a drawing that I did of one of the seismographic drawings, seismographic readings of my own. And then I thought, well, I can take this drawing into a CAD package, a 3D modeling package. Actually, the one I used was called Rhino. And I can use that to trace this network of lines in a two-dimensional drawing in the package. And then by moving one line, one point on the line, raising it. So if you imagine I'm drawing, all the lines are flat, and then I take that point and I raise it up to here, but that point stays fixed. You then get a line like that. And if you begin to do that and interpret the lines and where they are in the space in relationship to a fixed data plane, you could construct a spatial network that diverged from that data plane that would have some of the space that is enfolded in the two-dimensional drawing that's being contained within the two-dimensional drawing. So I did it as an exercise, as really a proof of concept. I think Irene's got a drawing of that. Is that the next drawing? The next. So that is that same drawing, but being looked at from the side. So the original picture plane is there, and the lines are moved away from, or in the two directions, either below or above that datum, and that's constructed this three-dimensional matrix. And you can see it doesn't look, it looks like a flattened or squished version of the other drawing, but the original intent was to then start to connect lines and make a plane so that you would get, as Irene's previous drawings, you would start to get planes and structural elements so that you would get a spatial enclosure. So it was a strategy for trying to find ways to map the space in the two-dimensional drawings. And that led to, I think, the next thing that you're going to show, Irene.
Yeah. So in our process, then I thought maybe it would be the best thing to start to build. I mean, to get physical with. So I took these sticks. I mean, first I was like drawing more or less like a floor plan, but also with the approach of this seismographic recording. So I thought that could be a basis. So the first sticks on the first layer I did set on points of my drawing, and then I just built it on top of it. I tried to construct that. It was somehow a good start. So there were then these little sculptures. But the thing was that it was so much interpretation and not really on the basis. I mean, I lost a bit the basis of really the drawings, the lines I had, and I thought that's not the real solution. At this point, I think I went away from Glasgow.
Right, but before you went, we had a lot of discussions about strategies for trying to find ways to use the model as a device for exploring and as a speculative tool, not as something that was an analytic tool. There was a kind of a double process of analyzing the drawings very carefully and trying to find ways to say, if that plane is here in space, then this other plane is being read as here in space. How do I map that and give those dimensions that can be organized and have a coherent relationship? So there was that sort of analytical side. And then there was also this other idea about how I can use the model as a way to speculate about the space that is in the drawing. So there was a kind of joint overlap between the two, analysis and speculation, with an idea that would be a synthetic process that would give Irene strategies for making spatial interpretations that weren't just made up, that had a strong relationship to the seismographic recordings, but also had space in them that was related to the seismographic sensations that the drawings were recording.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And then I thought maybe it would be possible, back to the thought that it is interesting to simplify structures. You know, you have got here, we have got the lines I will draw later in, and then I did put transparency paper on top of the drawing, made lines trying to find structures on this drawing, took this away and cut these lines out, because I wanted to have two layers, the drawing and the simplified structures, and that you could both see that. Robert more or less said once, it's a side product. A side product, or yeah. You asked me why I did it, or?
Yes.
Yes.
So there was a, for me, the thing that's interesting about them is there's an attempt to read a structural pattern, something that could carry weight, that paid attention to some kind of rules of gravity, but also had the spatial richness of the drawing. So there's a simplification, but there's also a kind of holding on to the essence of the drawing. Although I think they're very beautiful, but I'm still trying to get my brain around, because I only saw these about a week ago. Although Irene had told me that she was doing them, I hadn't seen them until just recently.
Yeah, and I just went further with them, and I also, to me, it's interesting just to have this, and I think through doing this, it's like learning the space in the drawings and learning to get more to know about it, to think about it. Also, when I'm cutting out, you know, it's like, I think you think with your hands and you learn also through your hands. So it's a really good exercise for me. And of course, it's not just an exercise. I see them also as works in a way, but it's also interesting, I think, this way of working, you know, and it's always the question about these architectural structures. Then you have something like a side product. And it turns out that this is also their like works. And I think, you know, by time things are getting more and more like have more and more such like products around this project. But I think finally it will help the project itself too.
Yeah. And also you're building your space making muscle is getting bigger and stronger.
Clara, from the background, what I found the idea fascinating, these seismographic drawings, that you have a structure, and this structure in the nature, we have a structure in nature. And we also have it in our body, and this corresponds. And to develop from that new idea of architecture and space, which fits together with us as a human being, this is for me extremely interesting. First of all, we learn more about ourselves, and secondly, we might develop a space which fits to our structure as part of a nature. This is deeply interesting for me. That's why it was so fascinating. And it's also interesting in your drawings, they have a lot of lines, but at the end, they are very clear, and they are not only abstract. You can find a landscape, for instance, or a city. We have one sculpture here on the wall, one drawing. It looks like a city. This is so interesting because you concentrate on yourself. You transfer from your brain with the pencil on the paper, and then we find something we know, obviously. This is really interesting. So sorry to interfere you.
Thank you.
My summary, because it is probably not easy for the audience to follow your deep architectural knowing. I personally do not have it. So that's why I make a small summary of the ideas in this way.
Well, I think that's very interesting, Clara, because I think one of the things that I find interesting about them is that they do have those strong formal relationships to other patterns that we might see in things like trees or microscopic images or landscape, you know, very, very, but what I find interesting is instead of as well as the formal relationships, they have such a rich spatial character that I can't help but see this ever shifting network of space in the drawings, and that's what really struck me when I saw them in the beginning. And what really interested me in Irene's examination or investigation or journey through this process is the way in which she is discovering a space that is coming out of her body, and the idea of that within our bodies we have a space that we could inhabit, we could project into the world and inhabit as an architecture.
Yes, and what is also, thank you, Robert, and what I think is also so interesting, if you look at the drawings by Irene, what I can do every day, I have the pleasure when I'm in the gallery, they make me silent. I really can relax, even though they are so complicated. I find an open space, which is a big pleasure. I really have a space to go in, and I feel being by myself. That is striking element with Irene's drawings, I find. Yeah.
Okay, what shall I say now?
I think you should tell them the story about your ambition to make full size.
Yeah, I think, you know, just very briefly, I think, okay, I do it with my body, but it's not so important that I just have my body, you know. So it's not so important that it is my body. I think maybe in future, it also could be that somebody else records its own body and maybe makes its own structure. But that's a long-term thought, but I think I really have to explore it myself to get the knowledge. So but it's not, yeah.
Well,
So that's a detail of that. And then I began to build these models with such structures you can see here. So I had such a structure that was simplified structure. So that was the basis for this model on the right hand side. And if you see maybe here, you know, this line is, for example, this line, or let's say this line is this line. So maybe you have a bit an orientation of this, what I have here, and how I did build it. So as I told you, it's like about the truth length. And then I start, and the strange or the good thing is that usually things come quite well together finally. You know, and then there were mainly small models. I did this way. Here you see that's the back, that's the front, or the other way around. It's the same model, for example. And so they got bigger by time. People into it to show what we imagine how big they could be, maybe.
we have lots of big plans for what to do next. Scanning them to get large digital data sets, and then using those to potentially construct large scale structures that people could inhabit. But that's the next part of the journey. Exactly,
that's like the next part of the journey, to think about how would it be possible to really make that they can become into being, more or less. So that's was the reason why I thought we once would need to have plans out of them, and it will be important to scan them. So I began to have a project with the Uniklinik Düsseldorf, and I could bring my models, and they did like the scans with computer tomography. And after that, I saw that these computer tomographies have got a huge imagery, I mean, options and possibilities of getting quite interesting images out of it. So they allowed me to work on their computer, because you have got just data, you don't really see something, you have data with informations. So the people, the radiologists, the people there, they have to sit on the computer and manage the colors to make, for example, a lung visible or so. And I could go exactly into this program, and I played with that, and I really pushed this program to find, for example, that's one you see quite a lot. I tried things here, but then they got quite, some got quite surrealistic, like this. And we made with the edition Gemelli from Zurich, that's Bettina and Sabine Kaufmann, we made the edition out of this project also. So maybe just, if you would like to see just a very brief, short 1 minute video of, maybe then you can imagine a bit more how the image looked like when I saw them in the computer, you know, because they are then digital 3D models, and you can turn and shift them. Do you see it?
Yes.
Ah, yeah. Can you see it moving?
Yes.
Great. So you get all these very short either image, either you can take images out of it or very short like video clips when these models are moving. So.
Lovely, Irene. Robert, is there anything you would like to add to this video you just have seen from Irene?
Only that they are very new to me as well. Irene showed me them last week. And again, I'm fascinated by the spaces that they project into the world and the possibilities that they open up and the resonance they have with a variety of different architectural projects from various different eras. They remind me of Constance work of part of the, an architect who was part of the Situationist International. He did these elaborate models projecting a world that he called the New Babylon, and they remind me of other architects from my various studies, and also of work that I've been fascinated with, things that I've done. Funnily enough, I showed Irene a bunch of models of things that I've been making for 20 years that they're not the same, but there's a place of conversation between them. So we're hopefully going to be able to start working together again. This talk has sort of brought us back together again, and we're looking at ways we can maybe continue the project.
I hope so. I'm waiting for your common house of Irene and Robert.
Yes. Yes. We have this fantasy that we will scan the models and then use robots to cut the timber, cut each of the elements, and then to assemble them in space, because robots don't need plans and sections and the traditional drawings. They can use complex data sets and assemble things. So we were just speaking about that last week, which means we're going to have to find somebody who can code, because neither of us are very good with coding.
Yeah, I think the project in the Unikliniken was very interesting, because we can think about that we have some data which we can transfer to an architectural program.
Yep.
So, you know, it's interesting also to think always a bit further, or, you know, wider, or using other techniques than you would expect, because with normal scans probably it wouldn't be possible, for example, to scan these models.
Yeah.
And so forth. I think if somebody has got the question, it would be nice to show themselves in the video and talk, would be much nicer, or otherwise writing in the chat. And you also can write in the chat, or talking in German if you better like, and if it's not too complicated, then I could translate it.
Constantina has asked about explaining what happens when you're mapping your body sensations. Still trying to understand what this means. So Irina,
Okay.
can you explain how you do the mapping of your body sensations?
Okay, I try to explain. I really try to concentrate on my body. And here is the paper, and then, you know, for example, here I think I concentrate on the shoulder, and then I really try to get into it with my concentration, and then I try to draw that, my sensation. Is that somehow, could you understand that somehow?
Well, we could try drawing one.
Would be great. But maybe if
But we can only draw when we have a shared screen. But when Irene first explained it to me, I didn't understand either. And then what I would do is stand in front of the wall with a piece of paper and a pencil in my hand and close my eyes and almost meditate in the way that you concentrate on a particular part of your body and then feel the sensation of the muscles and the nerves tingling or whatever they're doing. And then just keeping my eyes closed, I just tried to make marks that I felt were representative of those sensations. So that's the only way I can describe it. I don't know if it was the same for you, Irina. You've been doing it.
Yeah, I don't close my eyes. That's the difference, but it's really like that. I mean, if you have a paper and then you think, okay, if you really, I said at the beginning, if you really concentrate on your big toe, for example, and then you go further to your foot, and then up. Oh, now my English. What is next? Going up, like the lower leg, the upper leg, going to the back. And if you really do that, maybe also can do that for yourself, maybe then you understand what I mean with this. I think, but I just heard that 1 or 2 years ago, you know, that in yoga or so, there are techniques of scanning the body. And I think what I heard about it must be a bit similar. You know, that you really go in a part of the body and you're concentrating on your lung, or I have no idea how they do it, but I imagine that, and then they breathe into it and you're just really in that, you know. But then, okay, I do a bit, I mean, I don't breathe and I didn't know this technique at all when I began this work, but it's really like concentrating and then trying to, that's maybe why I always was thinking about this drawing machine, you know, like leading this through and making marks, like inspired by the sensation. Is that somehow understandable? Yeah, that makes sense to me now. Oh, thank you, good.
Birgit asked earlier about scanning the structures by using a 3D laser scan. Yeah, that's the plan, is to scan them and get a data set that says where all of the different members of the model are in space. And then we can use that to give commands to either a 3D printer or to robots who can assemble elements. Of course, we need a little bit of money and a little bit of time, but we'll get there in the end, Birgit.
Will do.
And then Roger has a question.
Can I speak?
Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, Robert, hello, and hello,
Hello.
Irene.
Roger.
Long time for both of you.
Yes.
But you can't. Well, it's just as well you can't see me. The question really is about the fragility of the work and its handmade quality. Because I think, you know, to stand in front of the work and to follow on from what Clara said about feeling very calm with the work, I feel also quite nervous and a little bit terrified by the absolute fragility of, especially of the three-dimensional work. And how important, well, clearly it is important, but it's also perhaps something that you are prepared to lose in this experiment with 3D image capturing through digital means. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I can see the reason for your anxiety, that the delicacy and the sort of the richness and the depth of the drawings, that something does get removed when you make the three-dimensional interpretation, and particularly when you start thinking about constructing something that's at the scale of the human body, which would require, as you said, you know, technologies and other strategies that would remove that kind of delicacy and that sort of fragility. But I think there is also the possibility that with the right calibration of, you know, I think it's going to be an experimental process. I think you could get that richness and that depth, that spatial depth, although you won't have that handmade quality that you referenced. I do think you can get some of the spatial complexity. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about the models is the way in which, as you move around them and as you move your brain at this point, because it's only our eyes, it's not our bodies, the spatial definition, the spatial enclosure changes. It has such a high degree of variability that fragility that you're talking about might be in the richness and the complexity of the spatial possibilities that are revealed in the three dimensions. That's my fascination with them, the way in which space coheres and has a kind of a readable condition, but then when you change your position, that condition collapses and a new condition emerges. That's what interests me about them. I don't know, again, it will be a process of experimentation. Who knows whether they will maintain that delicacy or that fragility that you spoke about.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it an interesting question. What I have to say, I never really was thinking about, but just I was quite often asked that I could do my cutouts with computer, you know, cutting it like with this, not scanning, but the other way around. I can't remember how, but you know what I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think, for example, for the cutouts, it would lose something, definitely. You know, if you just have all these straight lines. And it's true, you know, if you make it big, then it's a really experiment. And I think also we would have to build it to see it. It's something with what we can't really imagine.
I think you have to plan it for the Serpentine Gallery Summer Pavilion in London.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, if we could have that budget, I'm sure we could build it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks both very much. And thank you, Clara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Hey, Susan, and you were asking how is it to collaborate by Zoom? Since both of you are so keen on real space. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we both just started to talk about through Zoom now again. I mean, we didn't have contact for quite a long time. You know, it was really like, since I'm in Düsseldorf, our exchange collapsed in a way, you know.
We tried to keep it alive by applying for some grants to see we could find some money to bring Irene to the school, or for us, another colleague of mine, and to go visit Irene, but we were not successful. And then all of our lives got very complicated. So our collaboration is being restarted, and we're restarting it in the Zoom era. And we're not sure how we feel about that, but we're going to keep trying.
And as soon as we can meet in person, I guess we do it again.
Yeah.
And that's really also, I mean, also now it's good to know we can meet by Zoom, and that helps. But I think it's an interesting question that I think also for such a collaboration, it really needs to meet physically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be really interesting to do all the work on Zoom, and then find some place in the world where we can marshal the robots to assemble the thing where neither of us are there, because it's certainly possible to do all of these things digitally, and then to see what the experiment produces as a physical experience with your own body. But I'm a little skeptical about all the digital things, but I do see their possibilities at the same time.